for that.
I think Sherman might have the best backdrop with the barrels.
Yeah.
Your light got bright again, Drew. Oh, nope, there it goes.
Yeah. I don't know what, nothing's changing. It's awkward. Awkward lighting.
It looks like there's an aquarium behind Chris.
It's my nice big giant poster from Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't that the kelp forest? I went to that place so many times growing
Over to
up.
Facebook.
Okay. There you go.
In Bristol, so there shouldn't be too much background noise, but there's a chance someone could come in here and be loud, but I doubt it at this hour.
All right. I'm gonna crack in it. You guys all cracking these things open?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh shoot, it's trying to put this on my Facebook. You know, Zoom and Facebook, they love to change things up and not tell you. And now it's trying to make it on mine. So guys, bear with me a second. And everybody out there in Zoom land, bear with me a second, because yeah, I got to change things up.
Start having a drink. Nice.
Yeah.
Is that your first sip of the Shannon, Drew?
Yeah.
Nice.
That's really tasty.
Good answer.
Okay. I think I got all my crap together here.
Hang on a second, you guys.
Sherman. Hey, when was your first vintage, Sherman, of your Pét-nat?
Oh, it was just last year, so 19.
Okay.
I'm not on.
Or I guess 2 years ago. We're drinking last year, so we did 19 and 20.
So it's the heart over there on the right.
What?
Over there. I'm getting tech support involved, everyone. Sorry, hang on a second.
Hi, sorry.
I'm gonna get a bucket of ice real quick.
Cool.
While we're doing this, Chris.
Can you just be able to go?
No, it won't do it.
Are you
Go here
an art?
and then live on Facebook. So I'm trying to log into our account, but it's like it deleted it from me being able to be on it. And I don't know why it did that.
Paso Wine. Okay.
Oh, greetings, Steve and Martha. Hello from Ohio.
Hi, Stephen.
Hey.
Guys.
Oh, share on your own timeline.
How about we share on your page? Paso Wine.
There it is.
Okay, let me
so
go.
There's a new process, everyone.
Wow. Okay, let me go look.
Thanks, Jen.
That was a synchronized sip without even trying.
Did we synchronize the sip?
I think so.
All right, cool. I think we're live on Facebook. So for everybody out there on whether you're on Facebook or if you're over here on the Zoom side of things, there's a new way to mirror your Zoom thing to Facebook. And we just learned that just now live. So
We're on Facebook.
okay, thank you. Tech support says we're on Facebook. Thanks, JB. All right, everyone, right on. Thanks for joining us. Sorry about that weird little hiccup there, but Here we are for another Paso Wine Hour. Chris Toronto here from the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance. And today we are talking about Pét-nat. And it's we'll get into the intricacies of what it is and all that good stuff here in just a minute. But basically just know it's bubbles. Yeah, bubbles. So just another way of making them, right? Today on the show, we have Drew Phillips from Peachy Canyon Winery, Jordan Collins from Lone Madrone and Bristol's, as you can tell from the hat, and Sherman Winery. Hey guys, welcome. I want to give each of you just a hot second to say hello, who you are, where you're at, all that good stuff. Drew, I'm going to start with you.
Cool. Drew Phillips. I'm the assistant winemaker at Peachy Canyon Winery. It's a family-owned business. The Becketts have run it for, gosh, I think 33 years now, 34 years now. And I'm lucky enough to be working with them when they're starting to focus on estate-grown fruit and bringing everything under our own roof, which is pretty fun.
Cool. Right on. Drew, how long have you been there again? Sorry.
This will be my fourth harvest here.
Okay. Yeah. It's been a little while. So right on. Good. Hey, Jordan Collins from Lone Madrone. Say hello.
Hello, I'm Jordan Collins from Lone Madrone. It's a family-owned business started by my mom, my aunt, and my father, who I'm sure a lot of people know, Neil Collins. He's also the winemaker at Tablas Creek. We also make cider at Bristol's, and recently we started doing a canned wine project called Hike It Wines. My title is the assistant winemaker, but being a family business, it tends to be a lot more than just that. But yeah, happy to be here.
Right on. Good. We'll get into family business and more of the our guests' backgrounds today as we go along. Sherman Thatcher with Thacher Winery. What's up, Sherman?
Hey, so yeah, we're also a small family run business. We started Thacher Winery in 2004 and got our tasting room finally open in 2008. I've made wine up in Santa Cruz Mountains under another label with a buddy of mine, starting in '92. That's kind of what got us started and moved down and started this place and love Paso. It's been a real pleasure working with the fruit here and, but more importantly with all the people here. We're all friends. We all help each other out. And it's a very unified place. So it's pretty cool.
I love how the other day I get this email from you. I think it was Sherman, or did you text me? I don't know. But are we still doing the show? I ran into Drew and we want to make sure. And I don't know where you guys were at, but it's like, yeah. I swear it's happening still. So, the tight-knit community part of things is pretty awesome. Actually, earlier today, I was out at Via Creek. We had a journalist in town, and they were even noticing how, like, when they ran late yesterday, wineries were texting, winemakers texting other winemakers saying, hey, they're coming to you next, they're running a little late. Sorry about that. And I think I did that to you, Sherman, today. So all good stuff.
Yeah, Tony just texted Molly. So
okay, good. That's right. They're going to Alta next. Right on. So hey everyone. So we're talking about Pét-nat, and I think rather than me explain the process, I'd rather one of our winemakers actually explain the process and what makes it unique and what makes it different. And I'd love to start actually, Sherman, with you. If you could talk a little, because you were also a former brewer, and so it seems like this is almost like wine for beer drinkers in a sense.
Yeah, so I mean, this is not a foreign thing to me at all. Basically, that's how I made beer at a brew pub for almost 15 years. Basically, we would get the fermentation started and seal up the vessel right before it got done going dry, meaning that there's still a little bit of residual sugar still fermenting and producing CO2. But once you seal off any exit for the CO2, as it's created, it starts getting absorbed back into the liquid. And so it's fairly important to have a sense of how much sugar is left, because if you ferment too much sugar, you'll create too much pressure and either blow up bottles or just make things a lot more difficult in the future. we actually, this year we didn't get to use it, but I did purchase a beer fermenter. So I think going forward this year, that will be what we will end up using instead of doing it in the bottle. That way we're still doing Pét-nat where it's naturally fermented and naturally carbonated, but we'll seal up the tank, which is pressure rated and carbonated in the tank. And then we'll be able to bottle straight from that vessel under pressure and keep that natural carbonation. And I guess we'll just get deeper into it. Basically, I think we all had to deal with disgorgement this year. The hope is that your Pét-nat's going to clarify enough where there's not too much particulate left in the wine, but that wasn't the case with mine. And I know Drew definitely had to disgorge, and I'm not sure what Jordan did, but we tried a couple different things. So last year when we were doing our Pét-nat, we tried chilling it just slightly towards the end of fermentation to kind of slow it down. That way we didn't miss our mark with our sugar level as it was fermenting, and also to try and drop out some of the particulate. And basically we just ended the fermentation. It got too cold for the yeast, and we ended up with a slightly sweeter Pét-nat than that we were hoping, and we still had to end up disgorging it. This year we let it just carry on, and we didn't chill it at all. So we just bottled it at just about 1 brick, maybe a pinch less, and but we still had tons of yeast in there, and we're only about halfway through disgorging our Pét-nat right now. But disgorging means basically we'll bottle the Pét-nat at maybe 1 brick's residual sugar, put a beer crown on it, so it'll be in a champagne bottle with a beer crown, and then we'll keep it, at room temperature or around 70 degrees, basically, till it finishes fermentation. As far as we can tell, we'll crack one open and taste it here and there. At that point, we'll flip the bottles upside down, so the yeast basically settles in the neck. And then when we go to disgorge it, there's a couple different ways. Last year we used a bunch of ice and rock salt, and we just rotated bottles through that inverted. And then this year we used dry ice. They both work pretty good. The dry ice is pretty aggressive, so you got to move pretty quickly. It takes about 3 minutes to freeze that neck, whereas with ice, it's more like 20 minutes. So if you have a big enough cooler, you can just kind of gradually rotate through. But once that yeast plug is frozen in the neck, then you can set your bottle up basically vertically again and pop the crown off, and the pressure will push that plug out, and then you can top it with either still wine or maybe some Pét-nat that you've already opened, and then you just recap it, and then you're done. So then throw a label on it and you're good to go. So, and we actually just put our Pét-nat online today. We hadn't actually even got around to releasing it, but we figured this was a good enough day as any to put it out there. So,
cool. Yeah. Well, I'm curious, maybe from Drew, Sherman did a really good job in describing his process. Is that about the same process for you guys? Are you also going through that whole disgorgement and everything with this? So, and I thought you don't disgorge Pét-nat typically, right?
Well, you're bottling that active primary fermentation, so there's still a ton of yeast cells, and like Sherman was saying, particulates from the grapes, what have you, depending on how clean your fermentation, your juice that you have fermenting is. One thing that we tried to do was cold settle and rack our juice. Ours was Grenache, so our Grenache rosé juice. Try to cold settle and rack that really clean before we even inoculated it. Just kind of in hopes that we'd have a more clear wine at the end. Didn't necessarily work out. But we definitely had to disgorge everything. I think we have a little more staff than Sherman does. Because I have 2 guys working in the cellar with me, and then we also have Josh Beckett usually, and so we kind of set up a whole production line. But for topping the bottles, we basically leaned on what we'd done the previous year using corny kegs or beer kegs. And we shot our plugs out of bunch bottles and poured them into a corny keg that we're able to seal up and pressurize and moderate the CO2 in that keg. And then we use what's called a counter pressure filler to top all our bottles. And so I think we ended up getting, at least for the topping wine portion, it was real clean. So
describe what that looks like for everyone. Since we don't have visuals, but describe what that kind of almost, yeah, if you have something there, but
Looks like he has something.
Yeah. So
just happens to be
basically,
there.
wine comes in here. Oh, you hold it up higher. Wine comes in on this side, and carbon dioxide gas comes in on this side. And the carbon dioxide is also hooked up to the keg that you're filling out of. So the keg and the bottle can be pressurized at the same pressure. And so what you do is basically you pressurize your bottle by opening this side up. Once you hit pressure, you close this side. You open up the wine side, but because there's equal pressure here and behind it, no wine flows. So it's got this little valve on the side here that you crack open to vent the bottle, and you fill it slowly, and it allows the wine to displace the carbon dioxide that's in your bottle. So it's a much slower process than filling bottles of still wine. If you go too quick, if you slip, it could fizz up and make a big old mess. So whoever had the most patience on any given day of disgorging filled the bottles is what it came down to.
There's a great question in that. Is that done a single bottle at a time?
With our setup, yes. You know, bottling lines and trucks and stuff, people that do this normally have automated filler heads that can do 8 bottles at once or what have you, but you know, it's a pretty small project for us, and we're pretty low tech with it. So
Yeah. How small?
I think we did 47 cases this year.
47 cases. That's really not a lot. That's maybe 2 barrels.
Yeah.
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 Okay. That's, yeah. Jordan, your process. I mean, you guys, okay, so there was a question on there. What is Bristol's? Bristol's is a cider business that the Collins family is also involved in, or owns and operates. And so Jordan here is sporting the hat, but also at Bristol's right now. And I'm curious, the cider side of things, cider, bubbles, all that. I mean, is there some sort of an interesting kind of correlation in the cider making to Pét-nat making for you guys?
For us, no, we don't do any of our ciders in the Pét-nat style. We bottle all of our ciders pretty much, besides a few bottle conditioned ciders, with a counter pressure filler. So the same process that Drew was just saying, but we actually have 2 heads. So it's a little faster, but it's still so slow.
Sounds
Yeah.
fast.
Jordan,
Yeah.
what got you guys into, because it's kind of a trendy thing, right? Everyone, I mean, Pét-nat, it seems like it's become quite the thing out there. What for you guys, Jordan, your first time making a Pét-nat was in 2018, I think you said?
Yeah, 2018 was my first vintage doing it. My dad says that he did it in 2012, but I don't believe him. I think that he actually did it like in a forced carbonation style, or like a method champenoise, but nobody really knows. So, but yeah, 2018 is the first time that we did it. And I was doing vintage in Australia, and a buddy of ours, Sam Scott, who used to work at Adelaide Cellars and lived here for a while, I went and visited him in the Adelaide Hills, and he was making one, and I just loved it. And so I came back and I was like, guys, like we're gonna make one of these. And so we did. And we have an amazing Chenin Blanc vineyard that we make a dry Chenin from, and a semi-sweet Chenin out in the Adelaide district, right by David Bailey's ranch. And so we do an early pick for this, and yeah, we started making it that way.
So talk a little bit about that, actually. So we've gone through the process of how to make Pét-nat, and I encourage people, if you've got questions or more, anything else that you want to get in detail for, please Zoom or Facebook message us. But let's talk a little bit about why a early pick though for Shannon for this project.
For us, it was for acid mainly. We wanted to be able to pick it at a lower sugar and a much higher acid. So we pick our regular Shannon at around 22 bricks and around like 3-4 pH. And this one we picked at around 19 bricks and 2.98 pH. So we wanted to pick it a little early. We had the option and I had the time to be able to like go out and sample enough to be able to pick it right when we wanted it. Because you want a low alcohol, high acid bubbles, or I do. So yeah.
Across the board, you guys, is that what you do? You for the fruit when it goes to the Pét-nat, you're picking it pretty early?
Yeah, and you would do the same if you were making a sparkling wine. You know, it's those are the same. We've made a couple sparkling wines in the past, and those are basically the same numbers we pick for those two: 18.5, 19 bricks, and you know, really low pH, or around 3 or below, just below or just above, but right in there somewhere. High TA around 0.9. You know, it's just lots of acid because it really helps with a carbonated beverage. It seems that, you know, if it's at all flabby, then it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the difference between, say, the Champenois style versus what Pét-nat is, because, and then let's also define Pét-nat and who is it that has it actually. So you use, Jordan, you use the actual full name. Why don't you start, and what's the definition of that?
Well, it's naturally carbonated. It's a loose French translation of naturally carbonated. So basically it means that you don't add any carbonation from the outside. It's all produced during the primary fermentation in the bottle. So we're just using the primary fermentation like we've already stated, and it's still fermenting, and then it goes into an enclosed environment where the CO2 has nowhere to escape. So it gets pushed into the liquid and it creates carbonation.
And
Did you disgorge yours, Jordan?
No.
You didn't?
No.
So you let it clarify in like 5-gallon kegs first and then?
No. So yeah, I was hearing you guys talk. We do it a little bit differently. In 2018, we did disgorge it, but in 19 and 20, I have right like you said you did, I started cooling it down right when it was getting to the sugar that we wanted it. Got it completely stopped the fermentation, and I actually pushed it through 14 microns. And then bottled it straight after that, and that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm really interested that you said that, because Josh and I talked about pretty much doing exactly that, just taking a really rough filter and running that, because we pretty much, like you said, we almost stick it at like 2 bricks on purpose, just by chilling it way down. And then after it's bottled, we take it and put it in our warm room so that it'll just kick back on and finish up. But yeah. That sounded way easier than disgorging.
It was kind of scary the first year because I was like, well, maybe it's just gonna not. I mean, I'm sure we all go through this. Once you put it into bottle, you're like, okay, like, come on, we open a bottle every month. You're like, okay, is it done? Is it done? Like, is the middle of the palate done? Is the outside of the palate done? You know, because the middle of the palate's maybe colder than the outside. But yeah, it worked, and I did the same process this year, and we wanted it to have clarity, you know, if I didn't want it to be super cloudy like a lot of Pét-nats, and I didn't really want to disgorge it again because it was really hard. So
yeah, well, Drew and I both Drew got through his, I got about halfway through mine. I can't bear the thought of pulling the trigger on the other half of it right now because it was so painful. But as I mentioned, you know, we're gonna use the beer fermenter this year, and the beauty of that is we'll be able to seal up the vessel. It'll self-carbonate naturally, and then we'll be able to turn the chiller on and let it all settle out in the bottom of the fermenter, you know, over a month or two. And then at that point, we can just counter pressure bottle off the top of the racking arm and get a relatively clear product into bottle right away rather than having to deal with any kind of disgorgement, which, yeah, has been prohibitive.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So we were using these things, and basically we'd pop out the plug, snap one of these on, let it kind of settle for a while, and then I would, Daniel would pop out. Daniel's my assistant winemaker. He'd pop out the plug and he'd hand the bottle to me with one of these on, and then I'd let it release the pressure until I could finally maybe get some topping wine in there, and then but continuously, releasing this and putting it back on again, a champagne stopper, and then it's quite a process, and during that process we lost a fair amount of carbonation because I had to release it and then let it settle, release it again, let it settle, and sometimes I had to release it 5 or 6 times before I could even start to attempt any topping in the bottle. So
when we kind of set up our production line doing it, we got into a groove where whoever was doing the actual disgorging would also be stacking bottles into the dry ice. So you'd stack like 6 bottles in, and then 3 minutes later, like Sherman said before, you pick the first one out, pop the top, throw the cap on it, and then set it next to the filling station. And we'd have to like wait for it to pretty much hiss out until it'll, if there's enough pressure, it'll keep hissing through that champagne stopper. And about the time it stopped hissing, we could get the counter pressure filler in there. But it was it was messy. It was labor.
You guys, all you're saying is like, this is messy and there's a lot of hand work and this and that. Why do you do it?
Because it's
labor
cool.
of love, man.
Right on.
Yeah.
Let's taste some of these. Yeah.
Bubbly wine's fun. It's a festive thing. And we're happy to have it as part of our, our lineup. And, going forward, I hope I have a nice answer to the disgorgement, as I said, because that's been kind of the nemesis for at least us three. And I'm not sure how everyone else does it, whether they do a rough filter or what, but
hey, we had a question. We had a question from Facebook side of things. Could you control things better by fermenting to full dryness, filter, and then add a measured amount of sugar and yeast cap and let it continue to ferment?
Good.
Well, that would be method champenoise.
Yeah,
which is not. So that's a different kind of method. So then we would probably just call it sparkling wine. And not Pét-nat, because it's not really carbonating from its original fermentation, which is what the whole sense of a Pét-nat is. You are fermenting the sugar from the grape to carbonate it, as opposed to adding sugar. So you would have a lot more control, and you could nail your carbonation and all that. But then you're making sparkling wine. So
yeah.
And I think it's worth mentioning that even though Pét-nat is a trendy thing right now, it's as old as the hills making this style of wine. I mean, yeah. I talked to my dad and his friend Steve Goldman about this, and they used to accidentally make Pét-nat, like they'd bottle something under cork and stick it in the closet, and it would start popping corks and being fizzy. And I mean, that's how it originated, right? I mean, people were bottling their wines with too much sugar in it, and they were still fermenting in the bottle. The yeast wasn't killed. So we're making it a little bit different, but it's probably older. I don't know exactly, but it's probably older than method champenoise, the style of making sparkling wine.
I did a little reading about it as we were leading up to this. And so like to make Pét-nat, the French have a word for that method, which is method ancestral. And it literally came from a bunch of monks who had their ferments stopped with some sugar. They bottled the wine and came back in the spring, and it was bubbly. And they were like, "Oh, how can we repeat this?" And through trial and error, they developed method champenoise, where they could have a dry wine, add the right amount of sugar back, and get their carbonation right where they wanted it. But so this is a step older than champagne, traditionally. speaking.
And so there are a lot of different versions or whatever you can say about how to make sparkling wine, because then there's this version, the Pét-nat version, where it's original sugar and all. There's champenois, which is still happening in the bottle, but then you're adding it back in. And then there's, of course, the process where it's done in large tanks and then eventually moved into bottle. Then, of course, there's the carbonation process, but we don't really talk about that one. So there's these, in essence, three main ways of making some sort of a bubbly wine. I'm curious, I should maybe know the answer to this, but Lambrusco, you know, when you're having that little sweet Italian pink stuff, what version is that one? Anybody?
I would imagine it's basically Pét-nat, because if it's still sweet, I doubt they're adding enough sugar to make it a sweet wine again. You know, they're just finishing up their fermentation a little bit early, either chilling it or filtering it. And so I would guess it's basically a Pét-nat. And I said, you know, as I said, that's basically how I made beer. I mean, I made that the same way. That's how we carbonated all our beer when I was at the brewery. It was basically Pét-nat beer, which is a very standard way of doing it. And then you just keep it under pressure from that point on. And we actually played around with a little cider this year too. And so my cider was made the same way. We crush the apples, and that's what I use the beer fermenter. We're going to try and dual purpose it this year, but had them finish up had the cider finish up fermentation in the beer vessel, and then just sealed it up before it went dry, and it carbonated itself. So it's
Missed your apples, Sherman, this year. We missed your apples
sorry.
over here.
I finally brought
sad.
them in, but you
Right,
guys
they
did a good job over the years with them.
Yeah, thank you for that. We still have some in barrel from 19, and it is so good.
Cool. I'll have to try some.
Come back. Yeah.
So let's talk about our first wine, which I already showed this label, but this is from Lone Madrone, and it is 100% Chenin Blanc. And so, Jordan, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this wine. You kind of already did as far as talking about bricks and what it came in at, but making this one, talk a little bit about that site that you're getting the fruit from, and then just a little bit about what this wine does in your mouth.
Okay. I want to firstly talk about the label, because it was designed by a dear friend of mine, Shelby Ventura, who I went to high school with, and she became a graphic designer, and I was going to make this label, and she was kind of around back in SLO. She'd been in the Bay Area, and she kind of helped me design it. And the Lone Madrones the little Lone Madrone Triskells are supposed to kind of look like bubbles in the bottom of the glass. So she kind of designed it that way. And everyone says it looks like the Lakers. I'm not a Lakers fan, but it turned out to be purple and yellow just because those are the colors that she came up with. But I think it's a really beautiful label that she made. The grapes are from an old Chenin Blanc vineyard on the west side of Paso, off of Peachy Canyon Road, off of David Bailey's property. They're actually planted in 1971. It's like the last of an old Chardonnay. There used to be a bunch of Chenin Blanc out here, and it all got ripped out and planted to Chardonnay. But this one somehow made it, and it's just a tiny little block that somehow my dad was lucky enough to get us to be able to source. And we've been making Chenin Blanc from there since the 2010, 2011 year. But now we're doing three different types of wines. We're doing a demi-sec in an amphora, we're doing this Pét-nat, and then we're doing our dry that we just do in neutral puncheons. So it's one of my favorite vineyards it's kind of hard to get to and walk to, which is a pain in the ass during harvest, but it's one of my absolute favorite plots that we get to work with. And I think it's making good wine, and it's been kind of cool to get to pick it at different times for all these different styles of wines, and see that we really can pick wines at lower sugar in Paso Robles or at a little higher, and the wine can still be diverse and complex whenever you pick it. It's not like we just have to let it get to a certain brix before it's good wine. Like, it can be made low sugar, higher acid, and still become a nice white wine that's drinkable and that can be enjoyed.
Awesome. It's really delicious. Sherman, you're sitting there sipping on that one. What are you thinking?
Oh, I love it. It's the acid is really present. It tastes like there might be a little bit of RS in there, but that's kind of nice. It's balanced very nicely with the acid, and that's the beauty of, you know, wine. A lot of times, if you are left with a little bit of residual sugar, it'll often kind of balance out with something else in your wine. And yeah, this is super fun to drink.
Yeah.
Flavors are all there too, and I do know exactly where that vineyard is because I source from Dave Bailey too, and it's right on the other side of his fence. It's his old family vineyard, but really cool site, and you guys have been doing a great job with this fruit for years. So cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Sherman. Yeah, we're lucky. I mean, we don't, as you know, and as you make wine as well, like we don't do much to it. You know, it's what comes off that property that makes the wine. You know, it's
Yep.
just great, well-farmed fruit planted by David Bailey's mom, I think, back in the day. And it's just so much character in the vineyard.
Super steep, dry farm, just an amazing piece of property. It's pretty rad out there.
David Bailey he's not farming this right now, but I just have to give David Bailey props because he is the most OG farmer and he does everything out there. And it's just, you go out there and he's on the tractor, he's tilling the land. He works way harder than I ever have.
And he's got some Shannon, some of his Shannon coming back into the lineup. So that'll be interesting. I don't know. You guys probably already signed up for it, but I'm sure that'll be super fun to source.
Yeah, and some Barbera.
Yep, I saw that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Drew, you're sipping on this too. I want to hear your thoughts on this wine.
And this is like, it's like a sparkling Vouvray. It's pretty, I mean, it should be being Shannon, but just like how restrained it is with, you know, the earlier pick, the lower alcohol, the high acid, like it hits all of the points. I mean, I think it's beautiful, man.
What does this one retail for, Jordan?
Oh, I think it's I think it's $35 a bottle.
If you ever want to not get the right answer, ask the winemaker how much.
It's 35, I think. Yeah.
All right. Well, don't quote him on that. Go to loanmadrone.com and you can find it over there. Hey, you guys, you put so much time and effort into Pét-nats as we've heard from you. I mean, the messiness and the hands-onness of it. $35. I mean, that sounds about right for the amount of time and effort and work you've been putting it into it. But isn't Pét-nat, I mean, in the traditional sense, kind of considered, you know, a less expensive wine? Am I wrong there?
And I mean, yes, but I just think in places where we don't own everything, all the land, all the fruit that we're getting, we're purchasing fruit, we have rent, we're not living in France where our family has owned the vineyard and the winery for 1,000 years and you don't have any overhead costs, you know. So when we're pricing these wines, we account for everything that we're paying for, you know. So yes, you can find cheaper Pét-nat style wines in different places, but I think for what we're doing and these are great prices for these wines. I don't know how much Drew's is. I've never even seen it before, and I'm sure it's going to be delicious. But how much is it, Drew?
I think it's 36. I think same kind of, and I think we raised them. I think it was the first vintage was like 28, but Josh and I looked at at his brother Jake, and we were like, dude, we had to stop for a day and harvest and bottle this stuff. Then we had another couple weeks of work to prepare it after we warehoused it for 6 months to finish fermentation, let the CO2 really integrate and come to equilibrium in the bottle. Like, we've already put a ton of overheads into this. Like, it seems easier because you're not doing all of the bottle prep work beforehand. You're just kind of bottling that ferment, but you already kind of planned that ferment knowing that you were going to bottle it before it was done. You weren't going to get to do any of that work. So
That's one of the things I like about the Paso Wine Hour, you guys, is that you guys are actually super candid in talking about what goes into making wine here in Paso, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Hey, Sherman, you what are you getting into?
What am I tasting right now?
Yeah.
I just finally opened mine last, so I just wanted to see where I haven't had one in quite a while, so just kind of wanted to see where it's at.
Why don't we go that direction? Why don't we let's go ahead and take. Why don't you talk about this wine, which I'll put the label up, and talk about what is in this wine and all of the fun particulars.
Yeah, so well, I'll start with a label like Jordan did. We actually had my daughters in high school, and her roommate's a really good artist, so she did this one. It's a little different than our normal wine label, and my wife she calls it the angry grasshopper label, but I wasn't trying to make it look super evil. I just thought I'd put the color of the wine in the eye. So if we did a white wine, we'd probably maybe make the eye green, but since this Pét-nat was a little bit red in color, I decided I'd make the eye red, and I don't know, it does look a little evil, I guess, but kind of fun. And actually, if you look closely enough in the eye, we have bubbles in this one.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
That's cool.
Super cool.
And those were supposed to be, again, kind of like champagne bubbles coming up in a flute, but she did a really good job. She hand did the font as well, just hand wrote it, and so we were excited about that. This Pét-nat is actually our second release from our new vineyard. So we have a new vineyard out on Kyler Canyon Road, and it's about 15 acres. And last year was our first harvest out of there. 15 acres planted. We've got, kind of a salad bowl of things out there. We've got Zin, Carignan, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, Cinsault, Cabernet, and then we've got a field blend with 11 different kind of old, forgotten heirloom varietals all blended together. 2 of them are white actually in that blend, and basically we have to pick all those at the same time. We made it impossible to separate them just so we had to pick it as a field blend. So, but it's got like Mission and Trousseau and Cabernet Pfeffer and Valdiguet and a bunch of fun old varietals that have been kind of kicked to the curb for the most part in California, and at one point were fairly popular until other kind of more prominent varietals took over. But this
sounds like it sounds like a vineyard that Kenny Volk would love.
Yeah, I know. It's we had that 1 acre up on the top, and I was kicking it around, and Daniel said, well, let's do a field blend. And so we started looking at some of our options, and we went pretty obscure, but and we're actually matching it with an acre of field blend white here on our property over at the winery. Next year, we've got all the plants getting put together with budwood from UC Davis, and a nursery's tacking it on. Just we're going to put it on rootstock just to be safe. But anyway, this Pét-nat is made with Grenache, Cinsault, and Viognier. So the Grenache and Cinsault are from our new vineyard, and the Viognier is from over here at the winery. And we just we didn't really plan out what we were going to make it out of. We just we brought in some rosé Grenache, so we picked that early. Cinsault we pick early anyway, so those both came in pretty early. And then the Viognier usually has a fair amount of acid as well. We're in a cold spot here at the winery, so we're usually dying to get that stuff off, and it's like eye-wateringly acidic. So anyway, yeah, we just put these together in a tank and co-fermented them, and here it is. It's actually, I think it's a little more carbonated than I thought it was going to be. I cracked that crown and some bubbles came to the top. So
well, one of the things I noticed when I cracked all of these is that yours, it has more of a, not a consistent bubbling in over the others. So.
Yeah, and I mean that just depends on when we bottle it and how dry it goes, whatever sugar we decide to bottle at, or if it decides to stop a little early before it gets dry, you never know.
And this might have actually fermented a little bit after disgorgement. You know, us shaking it up and disgorging it might have got it going again, which it's still, you know, it's actually pretty darn clear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The clarity is amazing.
It's not settling out too much, but anyway, I'm happy with it. It's, you know, it's got some nice fruit on the front. You can definitely taste the yeast in it. I seem to get a fair amount of yeast character in the nose, especially kind of like some older sparkling wines, but yeah, fun, refreshing, bright.
Definitely good on a really hot day, but yet I feel like this wine you could drink it with food. Like there is something out there that I want to eat with this right now. I want to say it's McDonald's French fries, to be honest, but you know, but you know, the salt and then the bubbles and the.
How about some sushi with you know, a nice chunk of soy sauce and wasabi on it, maybe.
That sounds pretty delicious. Jordan, talk about this wine a little bit. What are you getting?
I love the nose. The nose is what gets me right off the bat. It's got like a tropical fruit type, which I wasn't expecting going into trying it, but it's got a beautiful tropical fruit, and I love the bubbles. It's so well carbonated. It's like for a Pét-nat. It's got a little more than mine. I'm a little jealous, and I like it. I love it. I could drink it all day on the beach. I'll tell you that.
All right, let's do it. We'll all bring like 3 bottles each and make a day of it.
Let's go.
I want to be invited to that.
Some fish tacos.
Drew,
Fish
Drew,
tacos.
you're drinking this wine. What are you thinking?
Well, between thinking about fish tacos and sushi and like yuzu and like the bubbliness, and man, my girlfriend is so jealous she's not on this show right now.
Rad. Dude, I love the blend, and I want, just before we move on to the next wine, the Grenache Cinsault Viognier. So you've got Viognier in there. Why the Vio, for one thing?
Well, the Vio actually, Cinsault naturally kind of falls off pH wise, even at a really early brick. We usually pick Cinsault for our red table wine at about 21 bricks, maybe 21 and a half, just because it can fall off pretty quickly. And Viognier actually also does too. There's certain varietals that just don't hold pH well. And but as I said, our Viognier here is in a colder spot, and so we went out and tested it way more than we needed to, just because we're like, oh, it's got to be ready now, and it just wasn't. But we finally brought it in, but it had a clip more acid than the other wines, and so we threw it in there just maybe to bring the pH closer to where we wanted it for sparkling or for a Pét-nat. And so the Grenache was nice, but again, we picked that for rosé, so we probably would have picked it a little bit earlier had we made it or picked it exclusively for our Pét-nat. But in a 15-acre vineyard, we did 17 picks, and so we were doing lots of experimentation. It was our first year, and we didn't really need any extra picks out there. So the Viognier just seemed like and actually we use, so this Vio block that we have here at the winery, we use mostly for co-fermentation. And I think we also just had that amount left, maybe, that didn't go into some other Syrah co-ferments. I think we did a Grenache Viognier co-ferment as well. So, but the majority of that Viognier, it's just like a third of an acre, goes straight into co-ferments for a lot of our Syrah. Almost all our Syrahs co-fermented with 5 to 7% Viognier. We really like the floral lift we get from that, and it's a Northern Rhone kind of thing to do. But we've messed with it on and off, but we really actually are starting to really be attached to it. So that's kind of become part of our protocol.
There's a question here from Steve Hewitt. Hey, Steve. Sherman, did you plant the field blend, or was it there when you purchased the Cuyler Canyon property?
There was no grapes planted when we purchased the property, so we planted it on purpose. And I do need to get that list and map posted on my website. I just haven't got that together yet, but I got one more adjustment to make to it. But yeah, I can't list all 11 off the top of my head.
Yeah. No,
but
that's cool. Where, just out of curiosity, on Cuyler Canyon, in relation to, like, say, where Paper Street is kind of at the end, and
so we're down, Occluse is right. I can see the back of
oh, okay.
Where there's a little tiny sliver of a property between us and Occluse Winery.
Mm-hmm.
Terry Hoag's right there. Onyx bought the property across the street.
Yeah.
There's a little easement that we have that goes up through two properties to get to ours, so you can't actually see it from the road. But Epic bought all the property on two sides of me, going all the way out to Peachy Canyon. So so they're right there as well.
I think Josh has a little piece there as well. Isn't that right, Drew?
Yeah, but a little closer to town still.
So
right,
Josh
on the
is
other
like,
side.
He's one hill closer to town, and so I was really stoked when he bought that, because I could go up to the top of my vineyard and I could see his trucks there and run over or text him like, "Hey, dude, what are you doing?" So yeah, he's a couple years behind me on that vineyard, but they'll probably get their first fruit this year. They'll get a little teaser amount, and then next year will be their first kind of full go. But yeah, Josh is right there as well. So one hill closer, and boy, he ripped his property and got mountains of rocks, and we ripped our property and literally didn't get one rock. And it's, our soils are fairly similar, but yeah, he had a lot more to deal with for sure.
It's crazy how, like, just all down that road, you look at all those hillsides that have been planted now, and I say now because 10 years ago when I came to town, there was not that many vineyards out there. It's insane. But it's all just white soil.
So quickly back to answer that question, we got all our budwood from UC Davis as well, from Foundation Plant Services, and had it all grafted onto 1103 rootstock, which is what we use exclusively over at our Cuyler property. It's a really good rootstock for the area. It's resistant to the lime, which is, the calcareous soil that we have. It's also great for dry farming, and it's a pretty well used rootstock in the area. So anyway.
Yeah, that whole little area of Cuyler Canyon is pretty amazing, and it's cool to see all you guys making use of some of that property over there that really can be dry, in a sense, almost dry farmed. I mean, do you have intention, Sherman, of going dry?
We've got 5 acres that's set up on 10 by 5 spacing that we're just starting to inch into dry farming. I'm a little nervous of when to pull the trigger, but this year we're going to do 2 big waters on all our Grenache, our Zin, and our Carignan, and then next year maybe just do 1 water and see how it goes. It really depends on what we get in the winter. I don't want to, cause any major problems, but we've really got to train the roots to go down low. And the problem with short watering intervals is you end up with a little root ball, and the plant can't survive if you just shut off the water. So you got to really train the roots to go down low. So you got to do these long waters, maybe 12 hours, get the water down low, and then don't water again for 4 or 5 weeks. So those roots just keep looking for water lower as opposed to at the surface. And then hopefully, Grenache and Carignan and Zin are all really well suited for dry farming. I think, Grenache and Carignan are very aggressive plants, and Zin does really well in this area. It's already well established as an easy dry farmer. We have some Alicante over here at the winery that's part of it got watered one year. At the very end of that drought, we did one watering, but other than that, we threw it in the ground. And luckily, when we planted it, we got 6 inches of rain the day after we got it in the ground. So we really, got watered in really nicely. And it started to look a little peaked at the end of that 5 or 6 year drought that we had. And I was like, oh man, we got to give it something. But
it sounds like we might be entering another one too. Right?
Yeah.
John Lindsay's report. And so that's a bummer. But before we get too far down that rabbit hole, we've got just a few minutes left. I want to make sure, Drew, we're moving on to your wine here, and here's where. Yeah, your turn.
So I feel bad because we don't have as cool a label, but it is cool that we've shifted. We just had a packaging change across our whole brand. We're kind of trying to, since Jake and Josh are in charge, and Doug's retired, he's in Mexico right now, I think, hanging out. We're trying to steer all of our brand back towards like the old school West Side kind of look. So we just bottled a bunch of reds, and we're about to bottle a bunch of whites and rosés, and we've got the peachy blue capsules on everything except for the Pét-nat because it's under the crown. But so that's kind of like the first thing about it. But our Pét-nat is 100% Grenache. I'm sure that everyone around town is hip to the fact that Grenache grows like a weed. It just throws clusters all over the place, turns into this big old bush. And so what we'll do is we'll let our head trained dry farm Grenache just kind of hang, and we go through mid-August and pick everything that's big and pink and green. And in pulling all that fruit off, we kind of allow the vine to ripen all of the red fruit over the course of the next month or so. So that's basically where we get our Grenache, and it varies year to year how much we have. Our goal is sort of to have enough for the Pét-nat program at this point. We used to do rosé out of it also, and we just decided a couple of years ago that we should start trying to sparkle it. And we had beer kegs, we had CO2 tanks, we had everything, counter pressure filler. We got all this gear and just kind of played around. And this year with Josh in charge, we came back and tried to really be a little more true to Pét-nat. And so it was I ran a cold fermentation on the rosé. Kind of took about, I want to say 4 or 5 weeks from receiving the fruit to getting to like 2 bricks, where we almost stuck that and bottled to get there. It was a pretty long process, but like you guys were talking about earlier, chemistry wise, we picked at 19.1 bricks. Our pH was probably about 3.13 or 3.12 when we picked. This is where we got with it.
Yeah, it's delicious. I love how, and I don't know how best to articulate this, you guys, but it seems like your bubbles in this one in particular are tiny. They're like so small. And not to say that, Sherman's got bigger bubbles and
Whoa!
But how does that go down? How does that happen?
You're asking about science I'm not even entirely sure of. When we started working on the project, Robert Henson was here. Gotta give him a shout out, because we wouldn't have ever started doing sparkling if it hadn't been for Robert. But we kind of just started looking into carbonation guides for like brewers, and then we started looking at what kind of carbonation do they shoot for champagne. And then we kind of played around with a keg that we were able to force carbonate and figured out where we sort of liked it. And then once we had that figured out, we were able to work backwards and how much sugar do we need to get there. And so this time around, I think we did a pretty good job of it. There's so much, there's variability, and there's also a lot of, you're developing a method to do something. It's like working on a recipe for something that you only cook once a year.
Yeah.
And so every year, what went wrong last year, let's tweak it this year. And so I'm stoked that we got the really fine bubbles. We wanted something that was more like cava, or like I mean, cava is probably the best option, or like almost a prosecco. Like, it's Pét-nat. It's not a method champenois wine. But if you get too low, you end up with like beer fizz, and it's not necessarily appealing. So hitting that balance.
Sherman. Oh, sorry.
Challenging.
Sherman, you just took a little sip of this. What are you thinking?
I dig it. You know, the nose is fun. It's like watermelon and like what is that stuff you get at the fair, that whipped
Cotton candy.
Cotton
cotton
candy?
candy. Yeah, it's kind of like watermelon and cotton candy. But nice fruit on the palate. It's a cool color. I mean, Pét-nat's, you know, the funny thing about making Pét-nat is there's really no rules other than that the bubbles come naturally. And other than that, it can be pretty much any way under the sun. So, yeah, I think it's a good job. And again, let's do our beach party.
Yeah.
I know it's so amazing that we're drinking 2020 wines right now. I know it's Pét-nat and it's supposed to be released fairly early, but it's pretty fun that we're just drinking these delicious wines that were just bottled recently. I love it.
I dig it. I dig it a lot. There was a question earlier about alcohol. I'm just going to do a quick rundown. The Lone Madrone is 11.5 in alcohol. And then we've got the Thatcher, which is 12.75. And then the Peachy, where are we at there? 12.2. I love how exact you guys are. So low, well, we're calling it low alcohol. Other people might say, whoa, wow. but low alcohol, fun, interesting, and cool wines, bubbles. You can't go wrong. You guys, an hour has flown by, if you can believe it. And so I want to thank you for being on the Paso Wine Hour this week. Had a great time, and this was so interesting. I feel like I could ask a lot more questions of you guys, and I love how focused and detailed you've gotten to. So I hope the audience has appreciated that as well. We will be back next week with another Paso Wine Hour. Next week, we're doing a women in wine type of thing, where we have 3 guests, all ladies in our industry at different levels, doing different things, actually. So it's not like Winemaker, and you know, it's all really truly different. And so I hope you tune in and check that one out. We again will be mirroring it over to Facebook now that we know how to do that again. Drew, thank you, Jordan, Sherman. Cheers, you guys. I appreciate you being on.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate it. Drew,
Right
Jordan,
on.
we'll hang out soon.
And now we
I want to
can.
be invited to that beach party when you guys do it.
All right. Well,
Everybody
invite Chris
still
too.
on pasowine.com. Go there. You can see where the next show is. You can check out the next podcast that's coming out, Where Wine Takes You. And you can also check out, don't forget, we do have our auction coming up that we're rolling out here pretty soon. So go to pasowine.com and you'll see a lot of good stuff. Cheers, everyone. See ya.
Thank
Yeah.
you.